And it's another reverse redaction. My name is Judah McNeil. This is Teagan McKenzie. So today I wanted to talk about, well, you brought up the idea of talking about Harry Potter and The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could talk about the whole huge series, but maybe we should zoom in a little bit and talk first about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And of course, C.S. Lewis is one of your biggest. I mean, you
love him.
You've been reading a lot of him lately, too.
Oh, right? Yeah. The Lewis is a mainstay for me. I think it's been said that he's not a church father, but he's a modern church father. There's something to that. But undoubtedly, for me, it was a huge influence. I have no idea how many times I've read the Narnia books, and I'm currently trying to work through and read all of his other essays and everything else, just so I've actually can say that I've read everything he's written. But
every single thing.
That's the plan right now. That's what I'm currently working on. Yeah,
wow.
But there's a lot to it though. Like I think I mentioned this when we were talking off camera the other day. But there's a ton of his essays and other things. We sort of know Lewis popularly as author, right?
Yeah.
And author of the Narnia books, and then he's got a couple other stories that are less famous than those, but that's how he's primarily known. And then second, some people know him as an apologist for the faith, and done Mere Christianity, and tackles the problem of evil in a book called The Problem of Pain, tackles the question of miracles. And he was an atheist and then became a Christian, and so he has a good angle from which to talk about all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then there's some other lesser known angles on him too. I mean, the third angle is that he's a literary critic. I mean, that was his actual career. He was an English professor, right? And so he's got mountains and mountains of essays, and his biggest book is a criticism of 16th century English literature. So that's actually most of what he wrote, is things in that vein.
16th century, he was criticisms on 16th century literature.
Right. Yeah. And so you can see all of those influences coming into the things that he writes as an author, right? It's not those stories didn't fall out of the sky, and I mean they're really good quality, so you wouldn't imagine they did, but he really was meditating on these things for quite a long time. And that's how you get a story as good a quality as The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Interesting. And do you know where in the history of his writing was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
It's pretty late.
Yeah,
pretty late. It was in the last decade of his writing, which was in the 60s.
So he had already well defined his writing, writing style, and just everything.
Right.
And so you've seen the movie.
Yes.
What did you think of the movie?
I don't know. I haven't seen the movie since I was a kid.
Really?
Yeah. I've not watched it since I was a kid. Well, as a kid, I enjoyed it. The main thing that sticks with me as from being a kid is Prince Caspian. The second movie is the Switchfoot song in it. That's the part I always remember.
Interesting. I don't even remember that.
You don't remember that? Okay.
No, now, Prince Caspian was a better movie. The first movie, to me, all of them, I felt like were. And I was looking up the director.
Yeah.
Andrew Adamson. I've never even heard of him.
No.
He did Chronicles of Narnia. I don't know what else he did. But,
director for hire, I imagine.
Well, unfortunately, I think with a better director, there would have been a better sense of the world. Now, I think he did actually decent.
Yeah.
But it's almost like they ran out of funds, and the battles, and as soon as it got too complicated, I feel while I was watching it, it just it felt like Tonka toys or something. It just felt, it felt plastic. Of course, Tonka toys are made out of metal, but original ones. But it felt like toys.
Yeah. Well, and it's a relevant question too, because it's the way that most people came to Lewis originally, and that's part of why these two different stories or these two different worlds stuck in my brain. Right? Is that the Lewis was obviously writing quite a bit before J.K. Rowling was. Rowling's writing in the 90s, whereas Lewis is writing in the 60s, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of difference there. But the way that these things saw a wider audience was through the movies. And the reason you have the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe movie is because the Harry Potter movies were a smash hit. And you have movie studios looking around just trying to find any intellectual property they can to turn into movies.
Yeah.
And so, that was everything Gen Z over here. That was every movie that came out for kids was, they found another set of novels for kids that they're turning into like a YA, young adult action movie. There were tons of those, the Divergent movies, the Maze Runner, the it's too many to count. Well, even Twilight was like a grown-up version of that,
right?
Yeah,
it was a huge explosion of all this. Christopher Columbus, who did the Harry Potter first one, at least
the first two,
he went on to do the Lightning King or whatever too.
Okay,
it was like
Lightning Thief.
Percy
Jackson.
Percy Jackson.
Percy Jackson was another one. Yeah. Well, and that's what's weird about it, is that I think you can see in the writing style influence from Lewis to Rowling in terms of the novels, right? But then obviously in terms of the films, the Harry Potter films are the ones that are coming out first. And so there's a lot of influence from the direction of those movies on then all the other YA movies that come afterwards. And so the different formats that the stories have grown up in have influenced each other in opposite directions, right? Kind of a weird situation.
That is interesting.
Yeah, but that seems to be the layers kind of as they stand. So.
Well, reverse redaction is the idea that we go back and we uncover things that we might have missed. Yeah. And so what, you've read the book 100 times.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
What do you feel like people mostly have missed?
Oh, well, that's actually pretty easy. So I've been reading, talk about things I'm rereading from Lewis. I've been reading a collection of his essays the past week called Of Other Worlds and Other Essays. And in those, he has 2 essays that go together, and they outline his thoughts about writing, specifically science fiction writing, but other kinds of writing. And he makes a really interesting point in one of the essays that he does not think that works can be allegory from the get-go. Okay, that you can allegorize something, but you cannot write a work as an allegory to start with. Now, I think that's worth pointing out, because the way that Lewis often, at my Christian undergrad and seminary, the way that Lewis often gets talked about is he's contrasted with Tolkien, right?
Yeah.
So people will hold up Narnia and they'll hold up Lord of the Rings, and they go, okay, Narnia is an allegory, but Lord of the Rings is kind of like deep myth or something like that. This is a popular way of contrasting the two, right? And the point that people are getting at there is that in Narnia, there are some real things that the images in the books are pretty obviously pointing towards, right? Whereas in Tolkien, that's sort of there, but it's buried a bit more. You have to spend a lot more time with it, right? And so
more concepts and concrete things, constructs, like just, Aslan for Jesus. You don't have something like that. It's clearly in Lord of the Rings.
Right. Yeah. Well, and there was a joke that went around on Tumblr back in the day. I don't know if you heard this, but there's a joke where someone posits that they're talking as if they're C.S. Lewis, and they go, if anyone does not understand that the lion is Jesus, so help me God, I want to kill myself.
Oh my God.
Which is that's a very Tumblr way of putting it. It's really silly and stupid, right? But it sort of gets, to me, really crystallizes the way that people have thought about this book, right? But it apparently, at least according to Lewis, that's not what he's doing at all. Because, like I said, right, because the observation that he makes in this essay that I'm referring to, he says that a work cannot be an allegory to start out with. You can interpret it allegorically, right? But
that just seems counterintuitive, completely
counterintuitive. It is. Well, it's because nobody knows what the word allegory means, right?
Okay, well, tell me.
Well, so this is much longer. There's no way we can cover this whole subject right now.
Yeah, but it would help to
know. Yeah. Well, I'm just telling you that this is like we would need not just 6 more episodes of the show, but like a lecture series. Like there are mountains of careers in the academy that are being built on this question for the past 70 years. Like, this is a huge deal. And so, but yeah, so allegory, as understood coming out of the Christian tradition, originally is this idea of making the story real to you, right? So what do I mean by that? So something like the Song of Songs in the Old Testament would be an example, right?
Okay.
That originally in its meaning, it's a set.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you embed meaning into something that is relatable.
Right. That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And in the Christian tradition, there's this idea that we can do this with books that come out of the Bible, because the Holy Spirit, by his activity, is aiding us in our interpretation of it. And so we can approach allegorical understandings of the text because the Holy Spirit is at work right now, making the text real to you or real to me. Right. But that doesn't necessarily mean that meaning is embedded in there. In fact, the idea is that without the activity of the Holy Spirit, the allegorical meaning of the text is inaccessible to us.
Do you completely subscribe to that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. If anybody in the audience wants like one good book that talks about this, Hans Boersma, Pierced by Love. He's an Anglican priest, sort of in the like high church, like Anglo-Catholic circles. But anyway, that's just one book he's written about. Okay. This has been a big topic for his career, but that's one book he's written that gets at what this means, how in terms of how we read the Bible.
Where does the word allegory come from? Allegory. I'm trying to think. I can't.
It's some Latin root, but I have no idea. Yeah.
Allegory. Yeah. Well,
well, too deep of waters, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Pull it back to
pull it back.
C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, but still in the same vein,
yeah.
the idea that he was trying to craft a world and trying to tell a story about these kids who discover this land, discover this magic. I think that is something that the movie captured at the beginning of the movie. I think it really had me at the beginning of the wardrobe, everything. Even when she goes into Narnia, what's her name?
Lucy.
Lucy goes into Narnia and the snow, and even Tumnus. You know, all these things were working really well because I think, and I'll talk about this with Harry Potter, but when it comes to director and filming, as soon as they introduce green screen, the lighting just gets
it's gone.
There's the contrast, and so when they're walking in this real and there's this realistic lived in feeling type sets,
it's always the case with green screen, isn't
it? You introduce the green screen and it's like, well, we can't have dynamic lighting because the screen has to be lit. So we don't know where the light's going to come from. We're going to do that post. Now this is a thing that's kind of cropping up in on YouTube and stuff like that. A lot of videos are coming up and talking about like, why are modern films so flat, and that kind of
it's green screen. We know the answer. It's not even a question.
It really is.
So everything's made on a computer instead of with a camera. I mean, what did you think was going to happen?
But I think when it comes to storytelling with a camera, you have to have the nuances, the contrasts, and the darkness. And I think that's what the beginning of the movie really shows, a dark, shadowy, and maybe they wanted to show Narnia as a bright, magical, fanciful place. However, it lacked the nuance that darkness kind of provides, mystery. Darkness obviously provides mystery and like, what is that? What do I focus on here? And who is this? And so, but with the book, now that's also my criticism of Lewis. In his so compared to someone like J.R.R. Tolkien, I feel like everything is a little too bright. I guess particularly in Paralandra, when I read what's the first one called?
Out of the Silent Planet.
Out of the Silent Planet.
Talking about the space trilogy.
I didn't get to the last one because I just felt too colorful, too bright. And it didn't have enough, like the stakes were not clearly felt for me. And I feel some of that in it obviously he's gotten a lot better by the time he's writing the Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe series, the whole Narnia series. And I do think that he isn't as good as he's not as good at creating a sense of stakes and mystery, But I don't know. What do you think? Obviously, you like him.
Sure. Yeah, well, I think, like I say, I'm already on record saying I think it's brilliant, right? So,
but not perfect, right?
I mean, certainly beyond my ability to judge too much as a critic, right? I mean, and even to do successful criticism, there has to be a bit of love there, right? I mean, that's just how criticism goes. Let me try and answer some of your concerns by returning my point about allegory for just a second.
Okay.
So the thing that drives Lewis's writing, and he talks about this, is the idea of these individual images. And so he said that the image that drove his whole writing of the first Narnia book, and then ends up driving his writing for all 7, is the image of a fawn walking in the snow with an umbrella in one hand and Christmas packages in the other, right? And that this image was in his mind for decades before he ended up writing the book. And along the way, these other images get joined to that, and then the whole story sort of comes together. And he really cleverly, in the title of the book, tells you what the 3 images that control the narrative are, which are the lion, the witch, and the wardrobe, right? Now, it's interesting
in that particular order.
Right. And what's interesting about that is that most people focus on just the first 2, right? The lion and the witch, and, you know, this kind of dumb Tumblr criticism I was talking about earlier, which is, it's in jest. I'm not taking anyone too seriously on that, right?
But they don't focus on the
wardrobe. Well, it's interesting because you actually just pulled the wardrobe out and talking about the movie.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I was going to say about that is that those are the parts of the movie that are going to be the most effective, because they're drawing on the well of imagination that Lewis actually had for these things the most, right? I mean, think about it. Even though he's writing a novel, he's beginning with images in his mind, which makes it very apt for some kind of filming, right? If the people making the movie understand what is potent about the images in question, right? And in several cases they don't, right? Which is where the problem arises, you know.
That's interesting, because even reading it, and actually a lot of my experience with the Narnia series is my parents reading it to me,
right?
And as a kid, and then rereading it later, the beginning is much clearer. When you get into the battles, I remember sword. I remember, you know, certain details, but it's a little.
He skirts past it. The battle doesn't matter. Right. You know, I mean, and Hollywood's always doing this, right? They have to add up the biggest fight to the end of the movie. And this is catastrophic in almost every case when they're adapting a novel, right? I mean, the worst case of this is the Hobbit movies, right? Where they're trying to turn one book into 3 movies, and the 3rd movie is just a long fight that sucks. That movie is so bad. And literally in the book, you get about 5 pages of fighting, and then the main character gets knocked out and doesn't even see the rest of it. And they decided, okay, while he was knocked out, there's giant mutilated ogres that are bashing through walls and all this stuff, you know, and it's like, it's just not as interesting as the rest of the book, because surprise, surprise, completely immoral Hollywood has less imagination than a genuine Christian Oxford professor who's been reflecting on the nature of the world and goodness and God for 50 years. You know, it's just, that's just ridiculous. But anyway, so Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe movie is the same problem, right? They want to put all this emphasis on the battle because that's what you show up to the movie for, right? But Lewis doesn't put that much emphasis on it, you know? I mean, look, you know, talk about the book for a second. Between the various conflicts, there are a few different fights in the book, right? Between the various conflicts, the one that gets the most emphasis is whenever Peter's the oldest of the 4 children who go into the wardrobe and end up in Narnia, right? Peter, the oldest of the 4 children, slays a wolf, which is the first time that he kills another living thing, and it's his coming of age moment. Now he's ready to be Peter the King, right? So this gets way more attention in the book than the actual final battle does. Because by the time the actual final battle is happening, Aslan is back from the dead, and he shows up and just ends everything, right? Because it's all actually under his control. So the moral stuff, the character stuff is better than a whole bunch of green screen fight scenes.
You kind of brushed over that. So So Peter killing the wolf. Yeah, that's true. That could have been a wonderful scene in the movie, right? Like
they kind of do it, but they get past it quick.
The wolf itself wasn't that, you know, they could have had, you know, coming down from the ground up, making the wolf seem bigger, you know.
Right.
I barely remember the scene where he kills the wolf.
Right. Because the way it goes in a standard Hollywood script, at that moment, you want just a little bit of pushback, which anticipates the kind of blowout final action scene, right? That's how kind of 90-minute Hollywood scripts go. But it inverts the importance of them in terms of the growth of the characters, which is that Peter does more growing in that. That's where he proves himself, his manhood, his courage, his great-heartedness that he's doing this to someone else.
He overcomes his hesitancy to be a leader.
Yeah, exactly. That is the key character moment for him. And then by the time he gets to the final battle, it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to act in the same way, right?
That's interesting. Have you seen Dune?
Oh yeah.
Have you read Dune?
No, it's on my list, but yeah, I've watched the movies, and I keep watching the David Lynch one. I can't stop watching that one. I love the David Lynch one.
I don't know that I've seen that.
Oh, dude, we gotta watch. Make an episode about it. It's so great.
We gotta do an episode. Well, what we'll do is we'll watch all. There's 3 of them.
Yeah. I'd watch them all again in a second.
Yeah. We just watched it. I was watching it with the kids, and the scene where Paul Atreides he sort of becomes a man is where he is challenged by one of the desert dwellers. I forget what they're and his mother looks over at another, one of the more wiser desert guys, said Paul's never killed anybody because he says he's toying with him. He couldn't kill him, and then finally he kills him, and he has the vision, like, in killing someone you kill yourself, and and something. If they had done something like that with Peter, I feel like it would have been a much more poignant. Yeah, it would have brought much more meaning to the movie.
Right. Yeah. Well, and to bring the comparison back up that I made earlier, right? They're making a YA fiction movie to a standard that's set by the Harry Potter books, right?
Yeah.
And the Harry Potter books actually do this, is that and this is maybe getting into our next episode that we're going to film next week, but next week. But those books do that, right? Where they have the big blowout. They're sort of structured like mystery stories, a lot of them, right? And so you have all the big revelations right at the end of the story, which is not Lewis is not doing that at all, right? He wants to capture the majesty of these images that he has in his mind in the way that they fire his imagination.
Interesting.
So, like I was saying earlier, the
Allegory,
the wardrobe as it appeared to you, right, is it's this entrance into this other world, right, and it draws you in, and even the trailers for Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe back in the day for the movie did a good job of capturing that, right? We're entering this other world, a portal in some other world, right? Yeah. And this is something that comes up in the other 6 books quite a bit too. Is it what are the nature of these things and how do they work? And
can I tell you, I think that it has to do with wood.
Oh yeah, Go ahead. Yeah, it's great.
I have a belief that there is, in good filming, and this is why CGI is really hurting movies. You have to have something tangible,
right?
Even if it is CGI, you have to do it right so that you feel
the texture,
right? You feel something. You have something that is tied into the natural world, just to tie us into reality.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So then Lewis is later on in Magician's Nephew going to go back and write a backstory to this wardrobe where it actually comes from a tree which is planted from the fruit of the tree of life in another world that ends up back in our world. And so he's playing with all these ideas of, the kind of texture of reality and how these things entangle with each other, right?
Yeah.
But it's this just like engrossing image when you start thinking about it, I mean, books themselves, if they're good books, they always function this way. Or movies, same thing, right? That they kind of they draw you into some other world that's not yours, right? And you find things there that are true and false about your own world.
So, okay. So what does this mean for us today? I think I had a
you had a thought about what it meant for us today?
No, I had I have like a stinger or something. Here we go.
Okay, let's play a stinger.
So what?
Okay,
well, that was it. That was it. Dude, you need a Jamie so bad.
I do.
You need a Jamie so bad. And it's not going to be me, but you need one. Yeah.
I was thinking about that too. But so what?
Okay.
So I think, to me, the biggest revelation is that Allegory is not what I thought.
Yeah,
and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I totally agree. I need to chew on that.
Yeah.
And I am somebody, as you know, that agrees maybe less with literature, because I haven't thought of it, but more with real life, that there is something of an interpretation that goes into things as and so how we contextualize things that come into our lives. And I think that thinking about allegory, thinking about our lives as allegory, things, and because really, it is an allegory in the sense that what we're seeing, what is happening to us today, isn't necessarily what is, our interpretation of what it needs to be influenced first by God and His plan and the kingdom of God. But also well, of course, that needs to filter down and just be realizing that our own selfishness is tainting a lot of what's happening to us in the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the classic Protestant doctrine of total depravity, right? It's just how how bent our understanding of the world is, right? And even before that, notions of original sin get you pretty close, and the distinction doesn't matter so much for this discussion. But what I really agree with what you just said is that our first impression of things is often wrong, right? I mean, my takeaway from all these things, as I've been thinking about them recently, is another line that Lewis has where he says that there are plenty of books in the world that you can read once, right? But if you're going to be a thoughtful person, then what you need to do is really master about 3 to 4 books, right? Go back to them and read them again and again and again, and love them to the point that you can recite every little thing about them, And that to me seems very wise. And before I even knew that was a piece of his advice, I had done that with his Narnia books, right? And so I more than recommend people do the same thing. They're more than worth the reread. They really are.
So you have done that.
Yeah.
What can you give me at least a glimpse or something of an anecdote of how that has come up, and where you have been in a situation, maybe talking about something, and referred back to the books because you knew every little. I mean, other than sort of a
about to say, I'm getting on a podcast to talk about it.
But like in everyday life, where you're walking around and
Well, it comes into things that I write a lot. I mean, I pull in like little phrases and ideas from Lewis all the time. And for the purpose of this conversation, I'm saying when I'm doing it, but I do it all the time and I just don't mention it.
Unconsciously too.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the point of having it eating that book.
Right. Yeah.
Is having it so ingrained as nutrition to our thoughts and body and what have you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. The book I referenced earlier, getting into the allegory stuff from Hans Boersma, Pierced by Love is the name. Pierced by Love. And he has this line about when you reach a stage in your love of the thing you're reading, and he's talking about the Bible specifically, but it works here too, that you reach a stage in the love of your love of the thing you're reading, that you begin to suck the honey from the comb. That's what he says. So your understanding of it is so thorough that it becomes sweet to you, and you have to sit and enjoy the sweetness for a time in order to then kind of move on the last stage, which is the appreciation of God that you get from whatever thing you're reading, right?
Interesting.
And so go back, read Lewis a bunch more, and enjoy the sweetness of it. I mean, it really is. Yeah, it is really. My answer to your question is that the best thing for me about going back and rereading it is that I just love it.
You love it more and more.
I just have a great time. Yeah, that's enough for me.
Well, thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed talking to this guy. And we'll be back next week. We'll be playing the one about what's her name?
J.K. Rowling
and Harry Potter. I think we're focusing mostly on the first book and the first movie, but anyway.
Oh, wait, before we go, because we didn't mention there's new Narnia stuff coming out, and we don't have to talk a long time about it.
I think that should be brought up. We still have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to get into the whole thing, but this is just what I'll say, right?
Okay.
Is that Lewis's images work already.
Yeah.
And they work the way that they work for very specific reasons. The only thing I know about these new movies is that Greta Gerwig, the Barbie movie, and Lady Bird, I think she did. Yeah, she's doing this. And the only thing she said about it is that the Aslan is going to be a woman or voiced by a woman or something like that. His masculinity is a part of why the image works. And so I have zero positive, as an avowed and deep lover of Lewis.
Okay.
I have zero expectations of this.
Yeah. I mean, I like that director. I have to say, she's a libertarian director who tends to.
Well, no wonder you like it.
Weave in certain political
Sure.
However, I don't know if she's the best for this movie, but yeah.
So when it comes out, we'll watch it.
Yeah.
And we'll come back right here and talk about it.
But I think, who did they say they wanted Meryl Streep in the voice of Aslan.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
I mean, if they had done any other, like, what do they call that nowadays, where they swap in sexes,
gender swap.
Yeah. I mean, I could have maybe dealt, but the idea of swapping Aslan.
Yeah, there's a point for us to leave it, right?
Okay.
Vote of mild interest to confidence on your part, and just utter derision and disgust on my part. And that's a good setup for another episode. I think that starts the conversation in a good place. Who knows what's gonna happen?
Well, thank you, and we'll see you next week.